Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Renee Robinson. I'm the industry programmer here at TIFF. Each year, for our Creative Process Day, we try to reimagine ways to approach the building blocks of filmmaking. And of course, this year is no different. The shape of the next two sessions, which are curated as it's a duo of sorts, they arose from some of the discussions being confronted by the film industry this year significantly on the international festival circuit. With all the amazing stories that hit the festival circuit each year, how do we go from the physical word of the script to the metaphysical world of the screen? And once we've created those worlds, how do we populate them? As an industry, we continue to be conflicted by representations of gender and diversity, from script to screen, from production to exhibition, in leadership and on screen. Our world-building panel today brings some of the festival's most acclaimed writers and designers to the stage, led by our moderator, Franklin Leonard. Franklin is the founder of The Blacklist, the yearly publication highlighting Hollywood's most popular unproduced screenplays. Over 250 Blacklist scripts have been produced as feature films, earning more than 140 Academy Award-winning nominations, including 3 of the last 5 Best Pictures and 7 of the last 12 Oscars. So if anyone has the eye, it's Franklin. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our panel of world builders and moderator Franklin Leonard.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Franklin Leonard, and I'm the least impressive person on the stage. And let me tell you a little bit about why. I'm joined here by production designer, art director, Jess Gonjor, right here, immediately to my right, whose credits vary from No Country for Old Men to The Devil Wears Prada, as if there was any question about his versatility. He is also, my favorite credit on his IMDb page is that he was the assistant director on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
We all got to start somewhere.
We all got to start somewhere. It's a reminder that, even if you're there, you can end up here. Immediately to his right is Graham Moore, a New York Times bestselling novelist and the screenwriter of The Imitation Game, which was a 2012 Blacklist script. So obviously, I'm a big fan and rooting for that film. Immediately to his right is Julia Hart, the author, the screenwriter of The Keeping Room, which was also a 2012 Blacklist script. And did I hear you guys say that you went to college together?
Yeah, many years ago, we were in New York in college together.
That is
so it's
amazing.
nice to see you here again.
Hi.
And to Julia's right is Suha Araf, the writer-director of Villa Tuma and Lemon Tree, which is not here at the festival, but Villa Tuma is.
Scriptwriter.
The scriptwriter of Lemon Tree. So, this panel, I think wisely, by the Toronto Film Festival, was constructed as being about world building and not simply screenwriting. And sort of implicit in the question of world building is sort of the writer and production designer as God. And whether or not they're treated as such by the industry is a different question. But the first question I want to ask is, as a creator, what is your big bang? What is sort of the moment where there is nothing that then becomes something in your brain that eventually evolves into the world that you create? And you can use the film that you have here at the festival as an example, but I'm curious, sort of, where does that moment happen from nothing to something? Does anybody want to jump in on that? Did I start too big? We're talking about world building here, so you gotta start somewhere, and that's literally in the beginning. I think we have to go start with the writer on this one, actually, because fortunately, Jess has a script, so there's something there.
Okay, well, I'll start talking then. If rudely, I think what's interesting actually about it phrased that way is certainly with the stuff I've worked on, it's been historical stories. Our movie is a true story, and so it's not like I started with a sort of blank slate. I started with what happened, and so in some ways, the script is this interpretive act of here's what happened, kind of refined and turned into, a narrative story that you can tell in, 111 minutes in our case. Which is something like the interpretive act, I'd imagine, that you go through. You get a script, and it's like, okay, here's this sort of raw stack of paper. How do I turn it into something that's actually sort of beautiful and lush and something that people want to look at? Because I can assure you, having produced those stacks of paper, no one wants to look at that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, for me, I think like I get a script like Foxcatcher, and I read the script, and at that point I have to like emotionally prepare myself for what I'm about to go through. Because some of the stories are lighter, some are, funnier, but a story like Foxcatcher, for me, I had to like sort of emotionally prepare myself to like, okay, I'm gonna do justice to this story, and I'm gonna be all in, and and I know it's gonna end up hopefully being great. So that's sort of my like turning point. Like for me, I make the decision, I'm gonna go for it, But yeah, with everything that you guys write, I have to figure out. Not what's just going to look good behind somebody's head, but what's going to tell the story, what's going to not scream to the audience, but whisper to the audience, because the walls can't talk, the vehicles can't talk, but how do I communicate and sort of lineate and navigate a story through the scenery, through the words that you guys write?
For me I shouldn't have my back. I'll tell you this story. For me, for this movie in particular, for The Keeping Room, it was setting. Absolutely. The characters came after, which isn't always the case for me. My husband, who produced the movie, we were visiting friends in Georgia, and their folks own a pre-Civil War farm. And there was a myth that came with the house that they told us after we all drank about a half a bottle of moonshine. That I won't tell you because it would ruin the movie, but it started with that setting in that place, and that setting in that place was in my mind the entire time I was creating character and the entire time I was writing it.
But what form does the process of creation take for you? I mean, you have this story, you're sort of working through it in your head. Are you outlining? Are you sort of writing character bios, like specifically for The Keeping Room, and especially because it is sort of an original story, even if it is based on sort of a house legend? What is your process of creation?
The time and place, as I said, was kind of given to me.
Right.
And then the next step was character. And I don't do character bios. For me, character is all through dialogue. So I outline everything. I write prose outlines for every script that I write first. But the thing that I wrote first was a scene of dialogue that is almost verbatim in the film. That's like the climactic scene in the movie.
Wow. How about you, Suha?
Okay, I came from Palestine, Israel, a very moving and interesting area. So I inspired by images or stories that somebody told me. Sometimes in the taxi, you hear people talking about something. For me, how to make this image that I saw and stuck in my hand to a story, it's a long process. I will give example, the film that I have here, as a writer, director, Villa Tuma. Tomorrow it's my premiere. This story, I found it a long time ago, at least 20 years ago, and based in a hotel, a small hotel in Ramallah, that closed in '67 in the war when Ramallah was occupied by Israel. And this image of this hotel, empty hotel, stuck in my mind. And I decided that I want to find a story. I have no idea what. And I found a story to build it there. And there is a big difference when I wrote to myself and wrote to others. It's totally different experience. For others, as example, I wrote everything, but not small details. When I wrote to myself, I knew exactly the color of the wall, which picture will be put there. But for others, it makes him nervous, because your job as a writer, to work with the director that you are going to work with, and to find all the story, but you need to find his story, not your story. from my understanding, yeah? At least from my experience in the Lemon Tree and the Syrian Bride that I wrote for Aaron Rickles, the same director that I work with, we worked very close, and it's also both based in real stories, the two films. The first one based in a documentary that he did once, and the second one based in a small article. It was in the newspaper. Yeah? So all my stories I bring from the reality, and I believe that the reality it's bigger than anything else, at least in my area.
And that begs an interesting question. I mean, so you were a screenwriter, and you're now a writer-director for this film. You know, Graham and Julia, you both wrote, and then someone else directed the film. And obviously, Jess, you're working with, and you've worked with sort of the same directors on multiple occasions in Bennett Miller and the Coens. How is the process of, I'm particularly interested in Julia and Graham, you know, as a writer who creates a world, who creates that initial 110, 120 pages, then handing it over to someone else who is ostensibly world building with you or world building separate from you, depending on how the process works. I could talk a little bit about what's the process of handing over the world you've built to someone else to presumably finish it or transform it.
I had a great development experience with our director, Daniel Barber, and again, my husband, who produced the movie. The three of us worked really, really closely for many, many hours over Skype on the script. And what was so cool for us, we shot the movie in Romania, and we built we built everything. I just watched a million amazing people build everything. And so what was cool is we structured certain sequences around being able to build the sets. Like there's this one sequence, this like pretty intricate sequence that takes place in a saloon. And it was so awesome because, you know, I worked with Daniel and Jordan on it, and then Jordan's my husband, and then Daniel worked with the production designer. So the set was telling the story very literally, which was so awesome to watch. So you're not having to like negotiate a pre-existing structure and rewrite to fit it. You're getting to build your world around your story, which was so awesome to watch.
It's funny, it sounds from that description like you and I both worked on these things that were, when you talked about your story being sort of inspired by this real place, by this real story that happened, you know, our movie was about the sort of, in some sense, well-documented period in history, and in some ways well-documented group of people, in other ways not documented at all. So we were constantly going through this process with the director, who I worked very closely with, and even when we got to London to shoot it with our production designer, Maria, and her whole team, you know, the sort of, with every scene, it was like, okay, where did this really take place? What did that look like? Let's get photos if we can, let's get drawings if we can, let's get descriptions from people's journals, diaries. Now, let's go to the real place if it's available. Frequently it was. We had a number of scenes shot in the room where it actually took place. And then it was sort of like, okay, given this is the reality, do we want to create a situation where we can like sheet this wall a little bit? Do we want to be able to make it a little bigger? Do we want to be able to add a window here? Like, are there little things we can do to sort of make it more filmable? But because there was always a real thing there, that created a constant source of like, let's always go back to that whenever possible.
And just working with, and we talked a little bit about this backstage, is there a difference in working with a writer-director versus a director who's directing someone else's script as a production designer?
I think so. Well, yeah, I think there is. Like, working with Joel and Ethan, they've had an idea usually in their head for years and years and years, and then they put it down on paper, and then they're directing it. So they have a very clear idea of what this thing should be, and then I'll get the script, and I'll, go off for a month or two, and I'll break it all down, and I'll come back, and I'll find some environments, I'll, create some of the world that I think it's going to be, and we'll sort of regroup and take it from there, and there'll be, a lot of it, they'll be like, yes, that's what we were thinking, or no, that's what we were thinking, or we weren't thinking that, but this is better. So it's just start to have a collaboration like that. And then, with other directors such as Bennett, he didn't write any of the three movies that I did with him, but he was so close to them and so passionate about them and so involved with them that I felt like he did write them. So we just, sort of worked very closely on breaking it all down, and coming up with having the patience. It was one thing that Bennett has is he's very unselfish and he's got a lot of patience. So it's kind of a slow burn with him, and it's something, he doesn't sort of make up his mind that quick, where maybe the Coen brothers will be like, oh yeah, that's great, we'll do that, you know what I mean? So I enjoy both processes, very much. But having said that, for me, it's like, if I'm working with a new director, and it's always a little bit strange to, like, on an interview for a job, you get a script, sometimes you get 24 hours to read this thing and pitch what your idea is. So you're living with something for 24 hours, and somebody else has lived with it for years, and you sit down at a coffee shop and you're talking about it, and some words start to come out of your mouth, and you could see, like, I didn't nail this one out, so it's like not exactly what they're thinking. And sometimes it's it's a great thing. It's like, yes, I was thinking, and you start to push each other a little bit, and that and the process is born. And that happened both with, we seem to be talking about two different directors here.
Yeah,
so
you
I'll
have
just
done
continue.
other films, but
No, but it's fine. But those guys are my favorites. So and the process is born. It's like you cultivate a working relationship and a friendship, and you're, like I said, you're passionate about it, and the experience, usually is great.
there's one part of what you said that I want to dig a little deeper on. You mentioned sort of you get the script, you go away for 2 or 3 months and break it down as though that were sort of like a clear thing. What does, for you as a literally a world imaginer, sort of translating words into images, what does breaking the script down for you mean?
Well, for me, I'm a firm believer in a concept, and I'm sort of interested if you guys have that, in your process, because I actually come from the theater. I started out working in theater, and everybody knows, like, what's your concept for the play? What is your visual concept? What's your reference? Some kind of a style that you're going to assign a show. And I sort of, brought that over into the film industry, and I'm really a firm believer in that. Whether it's the pace of a movie that I can set with the scenery, the color palette I can create. I'm pretty big on that, sticking to certain color palettes, not to. So when you amortize the story, nothing like jumps up unless you want it to jump up. I felt like, in Foxcatcher, there's a few things that I wanted to hit highs and a few things that I wanted to hit lows. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie, maybe not, but there's a bunch of wrestling sequences that just needed to have like a sense of hope in the movie every time they went, and they were a little bit more colorful. So colors is a huge thing, but it's really me understanding the story, And when I say I go away for a couple of months, it's not that I'm on payroll for a couple of months before this thing. Believe me, it's not. Usually Bennett or Coen Brothers are like, give me the script, and I'll say, okay, I'm doing 3 other things, but let me start to peel away the process and get into what these people like these guys have written, and figure out, not, like I said before, not just what's going to make me look good, but what's going to make the movie look good, and know when to stop. Know when to, just for me, knowing when to don't go too far, don't upstage what's going on in front of the art direction unless it needs it. So that's kind of my process. I get myself together, and then I'll go back to like Bennett, and we'll have many conversations over the next few weeks, and then we'll hone it in until it's like I said, he's very, very patient, and I'm not the most patient person, but it definitely it rubs off on me, and it works.
I have a, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I have a wondering for you, which is that, like, the idea of a concept, and I as when I'm writing an original screenplay, I'm not really thinking about that. I'm not thinking about theme. I'm not thinking about concept. I'm just kind of, in the case of The Keeping Room, like, the setting came to me, these characters came to me, and I just started, I wrote an outline, I just started writing. But when we're pitching, so like you said, going to the coffee shop and sitting down with, the person whose project it is, and pitching yourself for, doing the interview for the job, you do have to very much so come up with a concept. You have to discuss themes in the pitch. You have to discuss, references, and which I imagine is very similar to when you're going out for something as a production designer. But I wonder when you actually get down to the work, because what I have to do, because it's what I do when I'm writing something original, is kind of let go of that. That is, considering I hopefully got the job, but I have to let go of that when I'm actually sitting down to write, and I wonder if that's the same case for you, or if the concept and the themes stay with you throughout the process.
For me, it does. I'm also a believer is like first idea is the best idea, and it will vary a little bit, off the track here and there, but usually, I'll try a bunch of things, and I often, very, very often, come back to some variation of the whatever the concept I had, or the first, things that we talked about. I mean, they'll be embellished, but I usually find myself sticking to somebody wrote something. Somebody was writing something about artists once, and they said a word, and you're supposed to fill in the rest. And there was a lot of us involved, and it was like, when in doubt, and I immediately said, stick to the original plan. And that's kind of what I do. But no, I was just interested if you guys had, like you said, it sounded like for this movie or some of it, you sort of backed into an image. You wrote a whole movie around one image that was in your mind, and that's fascinating to me.
And what I did, at least in my film, and it was really an Oslo Agreement 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You started the film 20 years ago?
Yeah, 20 years ago, I saw this beautiful hotel, boutique hotel, that closed in '67, but it's still an old lady with green eyes living there with memories. And it's in the center of Ramallah, where all the demonstrations happen, but somehow it's surrounded by a huge big wall and trees. And it used to be, people used to call it a small Paris. I found that my parents spent the honeymoon there, and a lot of Palestinians.
At the hotel?
Yeah.
Did you know that when you were first there, or you found that out later?
Yeah, exactly. This hotel was before the occupation of the West Bank. Big place for the Middle East. King Hussein used to go there for a weekend. Omar al-Sharif, the famous actor, the Egyptian one,
I really want to see this image now.
to go for premieres in Ramallah and to stay in this hotel. And this lady, she used to bring dancing group from Europe, especially Italy and Spain. And she lives there with memories, with black and white memories, a lot of candles and photos of dead people. And all the furniture is still old, but covered by white sheets. This frozen time, when I get there, and it's amazing, okay? It looked like prehistory, archive, that your entrance the wall, and you are in different world, and it's 2 meters from the main street. And this is the amazing image that stuck with me, okay, forever. And then I found the story, and it based in this lady and this place. When I wrote my script, because I know that I'm going to direct this film, I'm not going to give this script for anyone, okay? There's a script that I'm very happy to give, but this one, it's mine, okay? I wrote also the interests of this place, exactly. What's in the wall, how many candles, which kind of pictures. I took every single thing that I saw 20 years ago from this small hotel. Now, when I wrote it to myself, the art was there. This is my art director told me. It was very easy to do the art, and I did first film about Palestinian Christian bourgeois, aristocratic, yeah? And nobody knows, at least also Palestinian, they don't know that it used to be a very bourgeois city, Ramallah, before the war of '67, and it used to be also a Christian city. 70% from the population used to be Christian. And this evidence also Palestinians don't know now, okay, for now. So it was hard to find the art. What I mean by the art, to find the houses, old houses that still have the style, have the classic, have the same old furniture before the war, '67, And they use also to bring artists to paint in the walls. All the walls used to be handmade. And this is what we did. I go and I did a long research, at least 1 year research, and I take photos for every single furniture and walls and painting, and I bring to my art director, and he did amazing work. He translate my words to art. In the Lemon Tree that I wrote for Iran Reckless, I was involved also in the art because I'm Palestinian. I can go by myself to the West Bank. I can go to refugee camp, but the art director was a Jew, Israeli Jew. He couldn't travel there. So I took a small camera and I go to refugee camp and I photo for him, a video, okay? How refugee camp look like. I take photos also for graffiti, for posters, because they need to find out, yeah? They need to build all the refugee camp. In The Syrian Bride, I don't know if somebody have a chance to watch it. It's a film from 2004. We built a village there because we couldn't allow to film in this part of area. So we built everything. And in the Lemon Tree, we built all the wall. The fan around the West Bank, we built it. But when you wrote to yourself, it's totally different. You know exactly every single thing. I wasn't disappointed when I saw the Lemon Tree under the Syrian Bride, okay? But I translate my words to art. I was involved, but not so involved. When he asked me for help with Arabic traditional things or Palestinian things, I helped, but I was more involved in the cast itself, but not in the details of the art. And you find sometimes it's a little bit different. This is what I imagine, but I was happy with the result. In my case, in my film that will be screened tomorrow, I also was disappointed a little bit from myself because I wrote a villa with a huge big garden with a lot of orange and lemon trees, yeah? And I found the location, but there is a small garden without any tree, okay? So what I'm going to do? I don't want to split to 2 locations to film the villa itself and then to find another place with a garden. And sometimes it's hard.
This is actually a great segue to my next question, and it's sort of going back to your comment about, when in doubt, stick to the original plan. Keeping with sort of the theme of creators as gods, sometimes you decide that your creation needs a flood, and you have to rewrite and start over. And I'm curious about your process in looking at what you've done and deciding that you're not satisfied with it and that things need to change. How do you, as writers, as artists, sort of self-evaluate your own work and determine when you need to head in a new direction? How do you approach doing that?
From my perspective, I think it's constantly, is I guess the short answer. It should be constantly flooded and reworked. And that was something that we talked about a lot. And I think one thing that I had found frustrating in development processes that I'd been through before working on The Imitation Game was the sort of the way the writer, producer, writer, executive, writer, director sort of system gets set up sometimes, I think, in the industry, which is they sort of the writer produces this stack of paper that's the script, and then the person on the other end produces a shorter stack of paper that's the notes. And it's sort of a trade. You trade a script, and then you get back notes, and it's a script and then notes, and it goes back and around endlessly for years, and nothing ever happens. So one of the things that our producers sort of found, and actually what our director was really enthusiastic about as well, is I think we had a process that was much more fluid than that. I mean, we were sort of always tweaking things, always changing the script. There was no there was not a lot of obsessive draft counting. There was not a lot of it was every day we would go, from the moment that I started working with the director, we would sit down and every day we would just start playing with stuff. Well, what if we change this scene? I don't know, let's see what happens, let's do it. Let's spend an afternoon and see how that works. See if we like it better, see if we like it worse. It was
Did it happen in the shooting itself or before?
That was before the shooting. I mean, by the time, we certainly had a pretty locked script by the time we were shooting. In some ways, I think because between myself and Nora Ito Teddy, our producers, and Morton, the director, like we tried so many different things that I think we eliminated a lot of false starts. But then even in shooting, it was like to sort of allow ourselves the spontaneity to move. If a location we wanted fell through at the last minute, which definitely happened, I'm sure you guys have experiences with that. We had a location fall through, I think, 3 or 4 days we were supposed to be there. And it was a location we were shooting in for 2 weeks. It was like a major location for the movie. And I don't think Maria, our delightful production designer, slept a lot that week. And yet she was as delightful as ever. You'd never know it. But so figuring out a way of, as last minute things change, okay, let's roll with that and figure out how to make this work somewhere else. I'm sure you've been through that a million times.
I think it's exciting when a limitation actually creates something better. So you kind of, what do they say, turn lemons into better scenes in movies.
I think that is the expression, actually.
Again, it's like so hard because you don't want to give away stuff because you know you're all going to go see my movie. Hashtag the keeping room. So we had, the first scene of the movie originally took place on a plantation, and you may not know this, but there aren't a lot of plantations in rural Romania. Shocking. And you know, as I said, we were building everything, but it didn't make sense to build an entire plantation for one scene.
Talk about an anachronistic thing to leave behind, right? Yeah. Like someone's traveling through Romania, they're like, wait, what? Anyway, sorry.
So I had to, like, I think a couple weeks before we were going to be shooting it, I can't remember exactly how long, but it was like pretty close to it, and I was so bummed because I really was into this opening scene at the plantation. Had to come up with an alternative, and actually I think it made for a much more exciting and much more different moment in the film, which again, if there hadn't been that limitation, that box that I had to work in, I wouldn't have pushed myself. So I actually kind of like when the circumstances force you to be creative, as opposed to being able to do anything you want. You know, there's something kind of great about that at the end of the day. So you'll have to see the movie to find out what the exciting, the new location instead of a plantation
It's actually on a spaceship.
Oh, you just gave it away.
Oh, well.
Now they don't have to
That's
see it.
actually not, if that wasn't obvious.
Because they have lots of spaceships in Romania, as it turns out.
Probably more than plantations. Jess, again, speaking on the sort of like last minute changes in location and then having to sort of create worlds in short order, is there a different process when you have a radically sort of abbreviated timeline, or ultimately is it the same thing?
No, it's, I mean, you can work on, I mean, I designed a movie, The Lone Ranger, which was like, it was one of these things where, you know, I said, nobody's ever come up to me and said, Jess, we have way too much money and way too much time to make this movie, so you want to do it? And I was, you know, like, too much time, too much money? Yeah, sure. I mean, that never happens, but kind of happened in that case.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's about as close as you get.
And that's the opposite of what I'm talking about.
Well, exactly, and I like what you're talking about. I didn't enjoy that experience. I like, you know, much more the things where you do have your limitations, because I find like if everybody agrees on what, you know, where a scene's going to take place and, you know, what the edit before it and after it is, you have time to really figure out something that's going to be seamless and it's going to end up on the screen. And it's, you know, if you're casting this giant net and there's ideas going all, you know, oh, let's go home at 1 o'clock today, we'll figure it out tomorrow. It's like, no, let's stay here and figure it out. We have, you know, an important story to tell, and we do have limitations. We have, you know, budgetary limitations. We have time restrictions, weather, you know, all these things that you think about. And, you know, I'm always like, I always tell everybody, I say, look, you know, let's pick. You know, we're on the fence about 3 things, and I say, let's take this one so I have time to make it great instead of waiting 2 more weeks and losing that time, you know? So, yeah.
I actually don't have a God analogy for this next question, unfortunately. But a lot of the people here I would sort of fall into the category of aspiring to one day be on this stage. And I think that one of the difficult things, really for any artistic pursuit, is overcoming those moments where you feel like, why am I doing this? It is never going to work. And I'm curious how you guys deal with that. Like, have there been moments where you say, you know what, forget it, I'm going to go to law school? And how is it that you then come back to continuing the pursuit of something that is, let's be honest, sort of non-traditional and really, frankly, scary, because there's no direct route from I want to be a writer to being a working writer that can, put food on the table and keep the lights on. There's no direct route from I want to be a production designer to being a production designer that can keep the lights on. How do you deal with those moments of sort of profound doubt and wanting to, forego creating worlds altogether?
Yeah.
Suha, it seemed like you want to jump in on this one.
Yeah, the way that I write, I'm a very fast writer, by the way. I can write a script in a week, less than a week, 5 days. I have a first draft. Yeah. But then I leave it at least 2 months, and I couldn't fix the mistake when I'm typing. I couldn't do that. When I'm write the first draft, I couldn't look to that. I couldn't read it, yeah? I put everything there, and I leave it for 2 months, at least. Mm-hmm. And then I came back. Sometimes I hate myself. What rubbish I did there. Yeah, and I thought it's funny and it's disgusting. Things that I like after 2 months, and because I forget totally what I wrote there. Yeah, sometimes I'm surprised. Okay, and sometimes I'm not. And then I start fix it after 2-3 months. And then I leave it for another few months without sending to anybody. In the beginning, I'm shy to show my first draft to anyone because I didn't feel comfortable with that. After a while, it took me at least the process 1 year and 1.5 years between the drafts because I like distance. Distance make me more clever, and I like also to show it to some friends, colleagues from the industry, to see what they get from there. Comments that I get more than once from different people, I take it seriously. But there is sometimes comments that you don't understand what people wrote for you. What's that? Yeah, especially from producers. Films that I did. Films that I wrote and became a huge, big
maybe you're
production.
working with the wrong producers.
No, because some producers think about money. As example, when I wrote The Lemon
Not
Tree,
always.
I start with aeroplanes and all this stuff, huge, big production. And then the producer, what you're doing, our budget is limited, yeah? So you need to cut. But I don't like to think about budget when I'm writing. If you think about budget, it will limit you as a writer. I like to write everything that I think that it's possible. Then if they limit me, now, as example, I'm working with a Spain director that is going to do a film with teeny budget. And his film about the of course, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and take place in Al-Khalil, in Hebron. And we have a huge, big funeral there with at least 400 extras, yeah? And he told me, Suha, listen, it's very expensive to bring all these extras. How you can fix it? That we can show funeral, but without a lot of extras. And it will be very silly if we will have 50 or 60 extras. So I decide to do something extreme. I cut all the extras. There is no extras there. But I bring a lot of plastic chairs, okay, and ashtrays with full of cigarettes, and the cups of coffee, plastic cups of coffee. So you'll understand that it was a lot of people here without showing anyone. So the limit of money, sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes it makes you more brilliant, more creative, to think about solutions.
How about you guys on the sort of scrap it all? How do you recover from that?
I think my last moment of should I scrap it all and go into a different line of work happened yesterday. I was on the plane and I was looking at the script I was writing right now, and it was not good. And I was reading over the scene and was like, wow, this is not good. I should be better than this. I thought I was good at this. What happened? I think I feel lucky because I have this other career as a novelist. And so, in some sense, it's like with the stuff that I do in film, I sort of have this thing in the back of my head, and I went through this process literally not 24 hours ago on this airplane where I was like, you know what, it's fine, I'll go and I'll finish my second book, and I don't need to work in film, and I guess I don't know how to be a screenwriter, and if this movie thing doesn't work out, like, it's fine, like, the audience isn't as big, and there's stuff I won't get to have, but I really love books, and I love writing books, and it's gonna be fine, and no one needs to worry about it. And so then, like, having that, like, I don't need to be good at this. Like, it's fine, I'm good at some other stuff, hopefully. And then I like figured out what was bothering me and fixed it and was like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad after all. But just being able to go through that thought process is invaluable for me. I don't know if, I mean, you've now been working for a long time. You've done a million great movies that must change all the acclaim. Tell me how you deal with the acclaim.
Later. No, but I feel like your question is almost like a life question because it's.
But it is. It's intended as such, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, you really, you know, in life, in filmmaking, you have to allow the good times to get you through the bad times, and that's sort of my philosophy. And I have to, if I did something that wasn't so good, or I want to change something, or I'm feeling bad about it, I have to draw from a good experience to pull myself up. And that's just life, you know, across the board. So, you know, everybody, you know, that sometimes like wants to scrap something, and I think you just have to draw from some other great experience to pull you through that, because it'll go away. It's just it's a temporary condition, because we're all here because we're doing something that we love, and I don't think. Maybe we're going to do other things, but I have a feeling it's going to be related to where we are right now. But so the passion is there, and so that's what I would say. If you know, it's like if you come to come to Jesus and say, I can't do this anymore. I have to go to law school. You know, think about something that you were proud of and that made you proud and that brought you to that moment. And I promise you, it will come back.
I did it backwards. I did the other career thing first. So I'm just happy to be here. So anytime I am feeling dubious about my work, I just remind myself how hard I worked to change careers. And
you were a high school
I was a
teacher,
teacher, yeah.
right?
I taught high school English, and then I wrote The Keeping Room, and now I'm writing I'm fortunate enough to be writing full time. So I just, as I said, that's my happy place that I go to, is how fortunate I am to be doing this.
So I think we're going to open it up to the audience, because, better that you guys ask the questions you want to hear answered than the questions that I want to hear answered. So let's do that. I'm not sure, is there a mic, or should people just scream? There's a mic right over here, so just raise your hand and I'll point to you and we'll go from there. How about right up here in the front? There's a microphone coming.
Hi, my question is for Julia. Just basically coming from a different profession and writing The Keeping Room, when you wrote your scenes and your sequences and your world, did you have a budget in mind, or you didn't give a crap about a budget, you just wrote? That's one of my questions.
Well, as I said, I'm married to a producer, so actually a good producer.
Let's pretend you're not married to a producer.
Well, no, but he actually taught me, and I think smartly, to think about what size is your movie. We knew that we were making on the smaller side type of, it's not by any means micro budget, but it's not The Lone Ranger. Somewhere in the middle. That was my husband laughing. So he taught me to know what kind of movie you're making, which I actually think is incredibly invaluable, because it allows you to make your movie. If you're making a small character piece about, a high school English teacher, and you want to have like a building blow up, it's probably not going to happen. So I think it's really smart to keep that in mind as you're writing.
Okay, thanks.
Other hands. Right here?
Okay, so world building not only involves like writing action and sublines and stuff like that, but it also involves writing dialogue for actors to build that world. So my question would be like, have you ever received a note, you're doing too much world building and you're not focusing on the plot? And if so, how did you respond to that and resolve that?
It's a really interesting question. So, I mean, do you ever how do you balance the, I'm trying to, on paper, create a world, like a sort of complete three-dimensional space wherein people sort of move in and out of it, and who the people are moving in and out of it? I mean, you know, Julia, you said specifically that you're really, the dialogue is key. Do you ever find yourself sort of focusing too much on dialogue, and it's like, okay,
Always.
what room are these people? Like, where are these people having these conversations?
I think the
like, how do
biggest-
you balance that?
I think the biggest note that I always get is like, where are they? Where is this conversation happening? And it's so important to let your audience know where this moment is happening. So I actually think, you know, stepping back from the dialogue and going back, like, but I actually like that process. I like knowing what they're going to say and then figuring out, you know, where they're going to say it. Obviously, when you're writing a historical piece, a lot of that is already decided for you, but letting your audience know what it looks like and what it feels like in that space is so important.
I guess the flip side of that, sorry, it would be, Suhai, you said that, like, you wrote everything, the number of candles, the specific photographs.
Yeah,
Was like, in the actual script, was it all description and very little dialogue, and you had to actually fill out the dialogue so you'd have people in there, or?
I think the most hard things for writers is dialogues. Most of the writers, we fell down in dialogues. This is my opinion, yeah? Always in my first draft, the dialogues are rubbish in mine, yeah? Always I have problem in dialogues in the first draft, but I didn't think about the dialogue from the beginning. I think about the human situation. And then the dialogues come out. I didn't start from dialogue. And then, okay, they are going to say that. So let's see where I'm going to put my characters.
Got it.
The human story is more important than the dialogues and everything is coming.
Got it. Graham, you look like you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, I was going to say that my approach actually seems to be, in some ways, maybe the opposite of what you were describing. I certainly, for the script of Imitation Game, there is almost no physical description whatsoever. It's like pathologically little physical description. There's almost no stage direction. No physical objects are described. It's kind of just like, we're in England, the south of it. Figure it out. And then like pages and pages and pages of dialogue. And so that was something, in my experience, and I don't know if this is helpful for sort of writers out there, that like, I've gone through this where in a lot of ways, dialogue reads better on the page. Like my goal, especially at the beginning of a screenplay, is to create a sort of readable document. This is a piece of paper that like you can read and like, oh, I get what the story is. I get who the characters are. I get what's happening. And then as the process goes along, and as I meet people, as I met people sort of more talented than myself who can like figure out what it looks like, let the experts do their job. Like, it's not my job to tell you what the room looks like or even how big it is. It's the job of people who know how to do that, which I can't do. And then but that process sort of like will naturally occur as more and more people join and are like, can we cut out some of this dialogue? And what if the room looks like this? And you can sort of do that sort of organically rather than trying to sort of create something where like you're spelling it out too much ahead of time. I don't know if you find that helpful, or do you like it when people write sort of lots of description in scripts, or do you find it annoying?
Listen, I mean, it's all coming from, you know, your voice, so I find it very helpful. And then, you know, we can decide if it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do for the scene later. But
That was so diplomatic. You were like, I mean, I'll cut it, but it's nice of you to try.
Yeah, I'll entertain the idea. But no, I didn't. But I have a question. Have you guys, anybody, ever had the experience of writing for a specific actor? Yeah. Like that must be different.
This is what I'm doing. When I'm writing a script, I know who's my cast, okay? But then, sometimes I decide this is the cast, okay, without discussing that with the director, okay? Sometimes he agree with me, okay, this is the one. And then when we did an audition, we changed some of the cast that I decide that it's my cast. In my case, as example, I'm writing for myself another film. I cast it before I write any word. So it's more easy if you know who's your actor and you know exactly how he look like, and how what he's going to do. It's more easy to write for somebody that you know that he's going to do to be your cast.
And even if you guys don't know who it is, do you dream of like somebody that, does that keep you going? Like, oh, this could be,
I think if you don't know, it can be dangerous because it can limit the possibilities of the character. Like I'm working on this script right now where I literally have no idea who I would want to play them or who is going to play them. And I think they're two of the strongest characters I've written. But at the same time, like, I like writing things with Britt Marling in mind just all the time because I think she's amazing.
It must help to have actors of that caliber to sort of be at your disposal for that.
Like she's the lead in our movie, and now I just want to write everything for her. So it's fun when you have people that it's what you were saying about collaboration, like limiting your description so that then when the production designer comes on board, it becomes a collaborative process. And I think the same can be true with your actors. It becomes a fun part of the process, but also, as I said, I also like the boundlessness of knowing who it's going to be because you can really go in any direction then with the character.
I think our next question was second row right here. Yeah, you. Hang on, let's get you a microphone.
Especially for production design, how much technology is there? Because it discourages me a lot when I'm thinking that way. It's about the technology because everybody seems to be really into it, and it's like that's all we have to know. I mean, I use cameras sometimes and stuff, and the other thing is a writer too. Like, I just feel sometimes that everything is technology now and nothing's changed. The other question I want to ask is, through my years of training and so on, a lot of the people that are in set design, for example, are architects. And the people in costumes are fashion designers, which I'm neither, but I have art background and so on and so forth. But that's why I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
That's actually a really interesting question. The tools of the trade for art direction now. Is it are you working, paper and drawing, or is it all technological? Is it somewhere in between?
Right now, for me, it's somewhere in between, and it's really, the scales are tipping in the direction of, computers and technology. Is your question as like how were we working in the office, or the technology on the screen, or how the movie's made? Right.
Technology side, or but I've seen some amazing things on the computer too that we can use. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a case-by-case study. If you're on something that you need to previs something on a computer, so you can really, calculate camera angles and work it out, and how much time it's going to take. I think it's, a necessary evil because I don't really love that. I like reading the New York Times, folding it around. I don't like reading it on my iPad, so I'm kind of like you. But you can't change what's coming, It just can't change what's coming. So you have to really,
adapt.
Yeah, you do.
Let's go right here, front row. Sorry to keep you running back and forth.
Hey, question about how reality and fiction conflicts when you create, like worlds. Because obviously, from one side, you use your imagination, you're going for like new ideas, and you're just trying to get these ideas in. But at the same time, you somehow develop your scripts from reality. You just said like farm in Georgia, and then there was this hotel. And so how do you create the balance? And when you're going into this world and going to the other one and research and going back again to fiction, so what's the balance and how you build that balance out?
I know there are a lot of, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I know there are a lot of purists who would probably disagree, but to me, the king in film is story, and so I think what's going to make the best story. I'm working on a piece right now that's about a woman who was alive, a real person, and still, we're like manipulating things to make them work better in the story. And I think I'd be curious to hear your response to this specifically because of what your movie is, but especially with what was cool with The Keeping Room was that it was based on a part of a myth, and the characters are all invented. So it was really fun getting to, and there's so little that's unfortunately known and documented about women during the Civil War. So I really got to do a lot of inventing and imagining with that. But I think at the end of the day, yes, if you're telling a true story, you want to make sure that you're respecting that, but also making a good picture.
I also want to hear Graham respond to this question.
There's a lot of pressure now, you guys.
I should
That's
have let
really
him go first.
Well, it is a true story.
Yeah.
It's a relatively well documented one, long after the fact, obviously. And I feel like there have been recently multiple books written about Turing since then. So like, how do you negotiate, sort of well documented reality with the need to tell an emotional story on screen?
Very, very carefully is like the shortest answer. I think some of it was sort of a process we were trying to figure out how to deal with, condensing all of this material into 111 minutes. And so some of the, it's funny, and from my perspective coming into The Imitation Game, I had written this historical novel. And so I had sort of had all these conversations with my editor about my book about it's a historical novel and it's based on a true story and a lot of it's true, but some of it isn't. And there was this thing with the book where when you put if you put the word novel on the front, it creates this like wonderful set of audience expectations because a person can read it and they don't expect everything in it to be true. You can sort of do whatever you want and no one, they'll sort of look up what's true and what's not after the fact. Movies, and I think this is really interesting, like narrative film doesn't have like a sort of novel classification. There's no like fiction, nonfiction divide when you go to like Blockbuster, or there is no Blockbuster, but if there was a Blockbuster and you went in your Netflix queue, there's no like fiction, nonfiction. In some ways we actually lack the language to talk about what narrative film does to the truth. So I think, one thing that Morton and I talked a lot about with Imitation Game was if we were going to have to sin, if we're going to have to change things, let's commit sins of omission, not sins of commission. So the movie's not, Alan Turing lived for 41 years. The movie is not 41 years long. Let's do what we can to cut and to combine characters. We combined a lot of secondary characters. We did a lot of that. There's a major character in the movie played by Matthew Goode, who's really a combination of 2 or 3 different real people. He has the name of one of those real people, but if you look at the history, he's clearly using bits of a couple different ones. And sort of things like that to kind of smooth things narratively. But let's try not to like say things that we know are not true or commit any sort of like horrible sense of commission. So that distinction seemed to help going into it. At the same time, though, with our story, we dealt with documentation, especially with sources that disagree, and with biographies that disagree. There have been at least half a dozen really great biographies of Alan Turing. We had one that was our basis, but certainly it would disagree with other ones. Different sources had very different viewpoints. In some ways, that's helpful because it's like a buffet. You're like, oh, there's clearly a really good way of doing this. There's a couple sort of things we can use. So that ended up being helpful, but those are some of the guidelines, at least, that we used.
So we are virtually out of time, unfortunately. But I do want to close with one question, and again, sort of getting back to the idea that everyone on this stage would like to be on this stage. So I think we have just under 2 minutes, so we'll do it this way. 30 seconds or less, what is the information that you wish you had known when you were out there that you now know up here?
Go straight to the meat of it. You don't need. If you want to be a director, you don't need to do all those jobs before that. Just start doing it. Just cut to the chase. That's what I say. And start doing what you want to do, instead of doing what you want to do to get to a place what you want to do.
That's really good advice, actually. I would certainly agree with that. Sort of, I guess, on the same thread, on a similar thread, don't make smart career decisions. I have tried making smart career decisions, and I have regretted every single one of them after the fact. Make the dumbest possible career decisions you can make, at least it's worked out well sometimes.
I agree with you, Jess. It's the just do it thing. If I had told someone or tried to pitch to someone, I want to write a Civil War drama, it's all about women, people would have probably looked at me like I was crazy. So just do it. Yes. I just wrote it, and now it's premiering at TIFF. So yeah, just go out there and do it. Don't wait for someone to give you permission, and don't, yeah.
So, final word.
Okay, advice for writers. In my experience, at least in my place, people are so lazy. They don't want really to work, and all the time, I'm not in the mood to write. They think that writing, it's a mood. Writing, it's a work. You need to wake up at 9 o'clock to be behind the computer and try and try and try until the end. And I believe in people who are believer, okay, and really passionate about what they want to do. I did also now my first film, and I produced it by myself because it was a low budget. No one wanted to produce a low budget film. So it was a very tough experience for me, at least. And to be a period piece in a low budget as a producer, writer, director, and a woman. It's very important. And now, this is what I'm going to say. Now, after I direct my first film, feature one, I did documentary before, and I found that documentary is a joke behind feature. It's nothing, really, it's nothing, yeah? As at least as director. And now I can understand why there is not a lot of filmmakers, women. It's too much stuff. Your life is not for you. At least 1 year. You need to be totally emotionally and physically in your film. I haven't time also to go outside to drink coffee. Emotionally, I was so busy. And there is a big price, yeah.
I'm really sorry. I'm getting the hook here. But very quickly, just to recap, just do it, just do it, just do it, just do it. Maybe be a woman is a sort of extra advantage. But thank you all for coming. You're obviously just doing part of it by being here. So, and thank you to all of our panelists. Bring our mics too.